Welcome. Welcome to this edition of Ramblings of an Old Fart podcast. Hello, my name is Craig Warren. I'm 71 years old. I've been married almost 53 years. Father of 9 and grandpa to a bunch. I'm sort of retired. I retired at 65 to provide full-time care for my wife who's had some serious health issues. But lately I realized that I need something to do to keep my mind active, to keep me sharp. So why not a podcast? I have a lot of experience, and I definitely have a lot of opinions. I've done a lot of things in my 50-plus years in the workforce. So what more would I need, right? I should mention that I've never been a member of a political party, and I do not intend to do so. My podcasts do not come from a political place, just a factual and common sense place. Today, my podcast I titled Who's Running the Show? The Crazy Few or the Rational Majority? So let's get into it. I recently noticed some surveys and some research studies that came out. One was by the Pew Research Group. The other one was by More in Common. It was called the Hidden Tribes. And then there was also one came out from the Manhattan Institute. These studies examine the internal factions of the American political parties, and they suggest that the wings, the most extreme on the left and right, are often smaller and louder than the more moderate groups. However, they're the ones that get all the attention. And that's one of the biggest reasons we're not getting anything done, in my opinion. So here's kind of a breakdown of what they found. On the Democratic side, the recent Gallup poll and the Pew data says that the party has shifted left over the last 30 years, but still maintains a substantial moderate core. We have a lot of people say, oh God, they've moved so far left. And they have moved, but there's still some common sense left as far as the way I see it. While on the other side, the liberals kind of seem to hold a majority a little bit, but it's what they call the exhausted majority. Okay, that's what the Hidden Tribe study found. They found out that there's like a 20% of the general population falls into that category. But on the Republican side, the studies show, the research shows that a high level of the ideological unity on the conservative side. They're labeled but they have divides in how the conservatives actually are applied in this thing. So they found that in the moderate conservative, that label doesn't really tell the whole story for either party. The most useful comparable study showed information like, and broke it down into topics like the populist were focused on trade, immigration, and anti-establishment stuff. The traditionalists focused on fiscal responsibility, national security, and institutional stability. And then this exhausted right that they referred to in the More in Common study identifies traditional conservatives, 19% of the U.S. population, who are religious and patriotic and are often more engaged in civic items than the devoted conservatives, like the 6%. That's the very extreme right. So I've often wondered why that somehow or another we can't get the middle together in the Congress, especially, These studies call it the exhausted majority theory. These theories posit that roughly 67% of Americans spanning both parties are fatigued by this polarized state of politics. They feel like they're forgotten in the public discourse. It's all strictly party stuff. They believe that compromise is necessary, and that's what they want. They want to see things happening. So, if you wanted to build a coalition, if you want to call it that, where Republicans could meet Democrats to see where they have areas of agreement, we might look at what we would call specific issue overlap rather than just labels like left and right. Right? That makes sense, right? And so here's a couple of things that they found in their research. Infrastructure. There's a high support across both the moderate wings of the parties on both sides. Vocational training has strong bipartisan support and appeal. Anti-corruption, term limits, those kind of things. High overlap between the populist and the left and right, on the left and right. So this makes total sense to me. Referring to the Manhattan Institute study released just a week or so ago, it was titled, by the way, Do Democrats Want to Be Normal? I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, it's been making waves because it challenged the ideas that the party has moved entirely to the fringe, on the fringe left. The good news is that the Manhattan Institute also released a comparison or companion study on the Republican side. Okay, last year in December. Okay, let's review both these real quick and see what they found. The Democratic study surveyed over 2,500 Democrats, and a lot of these were 2024 Harris voters. Okay, it found that the activist wing was much smaller than the social media suggests. It said that the moderates were a 47% of that group. They're older, more diverse, and electorally flexible. Many of them said that they had voted for non-Democrats in the past. They support moderate positions on crime, immigration, and DEI. The ones who have the progressive liberals equated to about 37%. They lean left, but they stay within the institutional mainframe, if that's what you want to call it. The actual woke fringe, the way, way, way far left, was 11% from this survey. The key insight, however, 38% of all the Democrats they surveyed actually want the party to move back towards the center. I found that quite interesting. On the Republican side of this, there was nearly 3,000 Republicans surveyed. And they found out that the GOP is not just this monolith where everybody thinks the same way. Though its divisions are a little bit more about tenure and style and not just left and right. But core Republicans, came out to about 65%. They're long-standing GOP voters. They're consistently conservative on economics, lower taxes, spending, all that stuff. However, there is a new category. They call it the new entrant Republicans. These are younger, more diverse, and often former Democrats, what I found surprising. Interestingly, they are a little bit more liberal than the standard Republican, especially on policies like taxes and spending and social issues. Okay, but they're also more populist and prone to the anti-establishment things, term limits, some of those other things. Okay, so my idea in all of this was trying to get them together. The Manhattan Institute data points to a few specific areas where Democrat moderates and Republican core and new entrants could actually overlap. Maybe see things kind of the same way even. Let's look at a couple of those. In public safety, there was overwhelming support on both parties for aggressive prosecution of gun crimes. Things like that. Not gun control, but gun crimes. Then there was they wanted to look at more of a skill base for immigration and deportation of criminals, and not for open borders. Anyway, there was a 2-to-1 margin on the Democratic side. They both say that they want effective government. They want to get rid of the partisan fighting. So these are just some things, that we could agree on that. And that's where we need to go, in my view. The data supports my hunch, though, that the moderates on the Democratic side, 47%, and the core Republicans, 65%, represent a massive chunk of the country that is far more practical than the loud voices on either end, right? Recently, I've been looking into the utility rates and inflation and all of these things that are affecting seniors and also low income. The last 5 or 6 years have been terrible for seniors on fixed income, I have to say. That's another podcast. But it seems like some of these people in the middle are starting to develop a consult your pocketbook thing. That's what we have to do as individuals out here. But they're starting to develop some of this in their way of doing business and the bills that they want to support. So, my crazy theory on this faction thing. After reading the recent study done on the factions, if you will, if you want to call them that, the Democrat and Republican parties, my theory is that the percentages of factions on both sides that lean more moderate was much higher than the extremes on each side. Turns out that my crazy theory wasn't that far off. So the theory of these studies, the representatives are currently terrified by 10 to 15% of the fringe, right, in their parties, in their primaries. So it looks to me like that the 70%, all of this stuff needs to kind of provide cover for each other and get this thing going so that we can take back the power in Congress. The idea that if you peel away that 10 to 15% of the woke fringe and roughly 17% of the GOP, like the Manhattan Institute identified, you're left with a massive block of people, around 70% of the country, that are basically looking for normalcy and they want results. So here's how the data for those two Manhattan Institute studies are. Okay, the numbers add up, right? If you take the Democratic moderates and the 47%, right, and 65% of the Republicans, you come up with this core group that can get stuff done, right? So my next thought after seeing all of this was that why hasn't anybody already formed a group like that in Congress? A voting bloc, if you will. I mean, the largest part of our representatives from a coalition like that would make their voices heard. They would have control. They would have some power, right? So, actually, I did some research after that and found out that somebody already has done that. It's called the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's a bipartisan group in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's currently made up of 49 members, divided almost evenly between 26 Democrats and 23 Republicans. They operate under a unique set of rules, the main rule being their 75% rule. The caucus only officially endorses a bill if 75% of the total membership, including at least half of the Democrats, half of the Republicans, agrees to it. This ensures that their endorsement actually carries the weight of a unified bloc of voters. I mean, think about it. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. If you want to get a bill to pass in today's Congress, you can't give up 49 votes, right? So that gives them some power, and that's where we need to be. We need to take the power back from the fringe groups and these super political leadership that we have. Okay, so this group has two co-chairs. They have a Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Republican. They have a Democratic representative is Tom Suozzi from New York. Okay, so here are some things that they're working on. Just to give you some idea, these are some of the bills that they are supporting. And I've always advocated for trade schools and skilled labor. I believe that's a really strong path for people to go on today's world, not just all of the four-year college degree stuff. We see how much college debt we have. Some of these get out of college. The stuff they learned is already outdated. It's not a good system for everybody. But anyway, I found that exciting because H.R. 1321 is honoring the Vocational Education Act, which they are supporting. I find this interesting. I had a son that went through this process when he was in high school. We had to fight like crazy to get him in that in his junior year because they didn't want to do it. But I just informed them that he didn't have to, because they told me he'd only do it when they're a senior. I said, well, you don't have to worry about him being a senior if we don't get him in, because he will quit school and he will go to work. He'll get an apprenticeship program or something. His pathway is working with his hands, doing things, building stuff, not for your college program. They finally agreed after a lot of fighting. But anyway, my point is, I look at this and I read an article the other day that made a lot of predictions about the job market in today's AI world. The group of jobs that were going to be the least effective, according to that article, were the trades. welders, mechanics, electricians, HVAC guys, plumbers, carpenters, okay? So I think this is a real big deal. I'm glad they're supporting this. They have an HR 33 fee that helps with child care for police officers and first responders and also some of the essential trade people. They have an upskill initiative. That's for adults who have gone out into the workforce already, small families probably even. And now they're finding that because of the changes in the world, the AI thing, that their job's at risk. So they need to be retrained, come up with some way to be able to provide for their families. I like that. HR 4503, the E-Permit Act, which is streamlines the process of getting permitted for some of these infrastructure jobs. You know, we need these terribly bad. I read an article the other day that in California, they have put in so much solar. They have all these solar farms out in the desert. They don't have the infrastructure to handle all of the electricity that's produced and get it to where it needs to be. It's estimated that 40% of their solar is wasted because of that. The reason they don't get the infrastructure built is because they can't get the damn thing, the permitting process done. Okay. Then they have the Certain Act, which goes along with that, which targets all of the red tape in getting all this done. Okay. So, now we come to the math part of this thing. They have this HR 4642 they're supporting, which is a Fiscal Contingency Preparedness Act. This requires the federal government to run fiscal stress tests, similar to what banks have to do every so often. They have to prove they have the assets in place. They have resources in place so that they can withstand a recession or some kind of emergency. I have no problem with the federal government being forced to do that as well. Okay, so the Problem Solvers Caucus is doing exactly what, in my mind, I can talk to this theory that we should get done. So I'm big on it. I'm looking into it. I found out that one of my representatives here from the state of Utah is already a member. I've got letters ready to go out thanking him for that and to encourage the others to do so as well. So here's some ideas that they are supporting and that they should, and that's the help ways to lower our utility bills by building the infrastructure, the tech classes for students, a government that actually works. So who couldn't be behind that stuff? One more thing I wanted to talk about. There's another group called Braver Angels. They operate under a Braver Angels way, which is built on several rules that align with my personal feelings. As I mentioned, I've never been a member of a political party, and I don't intend to be. So if I can find these organizations that are nonpartisan, everybody's welcome. We discuss. All you have to do is be, honest about it. Come to be part of the problem, not part of the, part of the solution, not part of the problem. But anyway, their rules are basically no finger pointing. We don't come there just to argue and try and win the argument and prove that we're right and they're wrong, right? You have to be willing to listen to the other side, see if you can understand where they're coming from. They understand where you're coming from, see if there's some middle ground, right? And then they specifically welcome people from, Republican, Democrat, independent, nonpartisan, whatever. They're just, like I said, the no finger pointing rule kind of a thing. They're action oriented. Like the Problem Solvers Caucus. They have common ground workshops where members work on different things, and then when they can agree all those, then they'll send this information to our representatives to try and sway them to work on this stuff. So, my last point today's podcast would be this. Take this information, use it. I would strongly encourage you to check with your representatives, see if they're part of this, caucus for this problem solvers thing. If they're not, encourage them to be so. You might also check into this Braver Angels thing, see if it's something you can get involved in the local group to help out. The thing is we got a lot of important things to do, I mentioned we have to check these things out and figure everything we can do, because our Congress is polarized so bad they can't get anything done. Somewhere we're going to have to help them. And I'm not sure how to do it, but this could be a way. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that right there today. And I want to thank you for joining me. I hope you found it entertaining, educational, or thought-provoking. Join me next time, won't you? I'm Craig Warren, and this has been the Ramblings of an Old Fart podcast. God bless and keep you till next time.